think this hyper-personalization is probably the biggest shift that's going to happen. Amazon doesn't once ask, what are you trying to achieve in your shopping? What are you trying to do next? And I think that's going to be one of the big shifts that will happen. AI holds up a mirror to society. It shows what type of society we are. If we train it on the society of the past, this is the result we'll get.
Hi, and welcome to Break Free with TopRank Marketing. I am Joshua Nite. I am the Content Marketing Manager here at TopRank Marketing. And this time around, we are here with Oliver Christie. Oliver is an artificial intelligence architect and endlessly fascinating human being, and it's a pleasure to talk to you. Oliver, welcome.
Thank you so much. Good to be here.
Can you describe a little bit about what you do for our listeners?
Yeah, certainly. So my background is artificial intelligence, kind of new technologies. So mostly what I do is help companies, countries think about how to apply AI, think about how this technology could be applied to make better products, services, make a country run smoother, whatever it might be. So I'm very interested in today's technology and also what's coming next, and really how it can be applied to make all our lives better.
I'm very, very interested in what's coming next for sure, but it seems like we do have a wealth to talk about just with what's going on right now. It seems like AI is one of those multi-tools that is in everything and a nothing, and everybody has it except the folks who say they have it and they don't even have a line of code about it. How do you start getting your head around like the categories? How do you break that down into things that are useful?
Firstly, I just think of AI as simply a set of tools. I don't get too worked up about the exact meanings behind each one, but it's much more, well, what do we have? How can it be applied? We've been using machine learning or AI for some time. You know, our spam filter, that is AI based, autocorrect, these sorts of things. So some of it is not necessarily new technology, but there's been a sort of explosion of what's possible. So we're moving into a new realm of an awful lot more technologies. So I mean, we simply couldn't have had a self-driving car 10 or 20 years ago, but now we do. What are we going to do with these technologies? How are we going to reshape companies, reshape society? What are the some of the challenges and also some of the things we should be concerned about?
I'm really interested in, we were talking about before we started, that idea of human-centric AI, because AI can feel like this distant or cold thing or something that is, it's powering my Netflix algorithm, but I don't know how it relates to my day-to-day. How is AI human-centric? We're thinking about people and individuals.
Yeah, so it's something we're moving more and more towards, is thinking about people as individuals and what matters to us. How do we talk? How do we act? What are our interests? So you mentioned Netflix, the algorithm which says what you should watch next. If that's successful, you watch more. If it has an understanding of what you might like, you consume more media. If it gets it wrong, if it doesn't know who you are, it's a turn-off. And you can kind of see the difference between that and other media services. So I think that the next big leap is going to be our products and services are going to be much more reactive to who we are, how we really live, and so on. But there's some big challenges there. So it's not a quick and easy thing to do, but I think the future is pretty exciting.
There is this kind of dichotomy of thought, though, whether all of this personalization is great or diabolical, or maybe it's a little both. Maybe when you're talking about a tool, it's how you apply it. But on the one hand, Netflix is sucking me in to watch more hours of TV than I might have intended to watch. But on the other hand, I'm happy and entertained. So how do you see that playing out? How do we stay away from the diabolical end of things?
Yeah, I think there's two things. One is intent. What's the intent of the AI, the algorithm, and the data used? And the other is what it can enable us to do. So I think transparency is becoming much more important. I want to know how a decision has been made about me or any way data is being used. want the transparency to understand what the decision was that was made. Most AI really isn't a black box. It is explainable, especially once you know where the data has come from. Privacy in, say, the US is kind of back and forth. Some privacy is okay, but it's always been challenged. I think this is where Europe has taken a lead with their GDPR to say this is what's private to you, and then let's build the algorithm around that. So it's a different approach, and time will tell as to what's the right route to take.
So what are some of the ways that you think that individuals or small groups of people are going to be seeing AI affecting their lives in the next couple of years to come?
So I think one of the big changes for marketing and advertising is going to be hyper-personalization. And that is to be able to make a one-to-one message to an individual, and that advert, the person looks like them, speaks like them, and the thing that's being sold or marketed to them is a perfect match for what they're doing that day or how they're living. I built out a piece of software a while ago, and it would understand who the viewer was. So your age, your ethnicity, your kind of loose background, and would create an advert on the fly. What we found was the click-through rate shot up as soon as you look like the person in the advert, and the advert talks in the same way you do. I think this hyper-personalization is probably the biggest shift that's going to happen. I'm seeing some things already, but there's much further we can go with this.
Have you ever been on Amazon while not logged in? It's such a striking thing to open an incognito window or something and you see, oh, wow, how much personalization goes into that page and how just clueless it seems when it's not on there. Yeah.
Amazon's an interesting one. Its algorithm is better than nothing. And it works to a degree some of the time if you match a pattern. So the music you listen to, the books you buy, if someone is quite close to that, it works. As soon as you deviate, it pulls down. Or as soon as you're looking for something original, it also doesn't work. So I think Amazon is a good example of where we are at the moment, but not where we could be next. Amazon doesn't once ask, what are you trying to achieve in your shopping? What are you trying to do next? And I think that's going to be one of the big shifts that will happen.
What are we trying to achieve with our shopping, though? Besides, for me, it's filling the void of not being able to go out to a concert or a park, having something to look forward to, the deliveries coming in. But what kind of intent are you thinking about?
Well, imagine you had the same shopping experience. And let's say it's for books, videos, courses. And the simple question can be, what would you like to achieve in your career in the next 6 months? Where would you like to be? Or what's happening in your personal life? What's some advice and information which could be really useful? And I think this sort of tailoring is where things are heading. So it's still selling you, books and courses and videos and so on, but it's understanding the intent behind that content. What could this do for your career? What could this do for your family life, your love life, whatever it might be? Now, of course, we're all locked down at the moment, so it's a very different sort of situation, but I think some of the same things still apply. But there's going to be a back and forth. So how much do you want to give up about your personal life to get a better recommendation? And I think we're kind of early in this in some respects, but the data so far shows, yes, if you get something positive out of it, you're happy to give up some of that privacy.
It seems like that is a series of conversations or negotiations that are going to play out over months and years. Do you foresee like a formal acknowledgement of this discussion, or is that something that's just going to continue to evolve through brands going, okay, we tried this and, oh, they didn't like that? What do you think?
I think it's going to be market-led. So whoever makes the best connection with the end user or the consumer is going to win, and that approach will be copied. I'm actually kind of surprised this isn't being done more already. There's an awful lot of online marketing, especially, which doesn't connect. It might be aimed towards me, but they don't really know who I am or what I'm interested in, so it falls down. The classic example was a while ago, I was doing a lot of online research for hair dryers for a client. And for the next couple of months, Amazon would say, we think you want this hairdryer. Well, obviously it doesn't work for me. It's not actually what I need, because they couldn't ask the question. And the interesting thing is, this wasn't me searching on Amazon, this was other sites, but it all gets collected. So this felt like a kind of one-way conversation where I couldn't correct, I couldn't have a dialogue. So I think that's what's going to come next, this back and forth dialogue. And AI obviously makes that possible.
So let's shift from there then to think about the other end, from the individual, how that's going to affect individuals, to talk about some of the ways that AI is going to be reshaping business and how companies run their business. You use the phrase absolute disruption, which sounds intriguing and terrifying. So can you expand on what you mean by that?
Yes, absolutely. So a lot of our businesses are built on very old ideas. Some of it is going back 50 years, 100 years, maybe even 200 years. Yes, we've got technology, but that's sort of layered on top. But you look at a bank, you look at any bank, they are basically identical. They have different branding, so you know them apart, and a different name. But the products and services are basically the same. So the same number of mortgages and credit cards and loans and so on. I think what AI will do will ask a new question. What is important with banking? What could the future of banking look like? And it could look radically different. Yes, it could certainly be very personalized to who you are, but it should also be with a lot more insight into the financial world. You know, if I'm going to set up a new business, say a restaurant, and I go to a bank, they won't give me any financial information about running a restaurant. They don't have the knowledge there. So I think we'll have a shift in knowledge, and that knowledge will be the key differentiator between different banks. So that's a kind of fairly simplistic example. Another fun example, I think something like an airport could radically change. At the moment, airports are broadly similar. You have a nicer design, but that's really about it. We've been working on a project which the idea is to be able to eliminate jet lag when you travel. So we know what causes jet lag, and we also know how to, should we say, fight against that. And an awful lot of that would be done inside the airport as a sort of new infrastructure, new layout, and a very different system of getting on a plane. So it's asking a new question. What is the airport, or what is the business for? This is the most challenging thing for most people, is asking a new question. All the AI is simply a set of tools to get there, but it's what's your new question. With cars, it's kind of obvious, you know, could we have a self-driving car? That's a new question. It's a pretty exciting question. And then what technology do we bring to make this happen? Every other industry should be asking one big question like this.
It's a really broad idea, but in a way that's applicable just about everywhere.
It's so hard to distill this down. Mm-hmm. It's and it changes for each industry. So it's quite hard to say, well, what's going to be the next big change for each industry? And it sort of is different for each one, and the timing is different, but it will happen. I just don't know the time frame.
It seems like it's more than like as a consultant, I would imagine part of it is laying out this framework for people to begin thinking about this and finding their next big question. Is that part of the whole package?
Sort of. I find I'm slightly skipping over the traditional consultant role, and instead I'll come in with a new idea, with what the future might look like, and sort of present that. And then, of course, it can be shaped and shifted, which is a lot more work, but then you get to have a much more interesting conversation.
What does that thought process look like? I mean, not to get too much into trade secrets or anything, but how do you even approach that when you're thinking about an industry and what their question might be?
Some of it is looking at first principles. So what is it that industry does? Normally I look at actually what is the company DNA as well. So you look at a company like Cadillac. What is Cadillac about? And I don't mean the marketing, I don't mean the messaging, or even necessarily the current products, but what's Cadillac's DNA? What are they about? Well, they've made the limo for every president going back in history, every US president, but going back in history. But what technology, what would you build next? And the answer is probably a type of SUV, which is very much like that presidential limo, with the same sort of same security, but gone much further. Something which can secure people, keep things private, and so on. Then you put it into a package which looks SUV shaped. What could this company be in 10 years' time? So that's normally my time frame is 5 to 10 years out, rather than a simple tweak at the moment.
That is great to think about the DNA of a company, like when you really distill down to their essence. I think that's a really cool way of thinking about it. Do you think that there has been any change with the current pandemic, the global crises that seem to be piling up? Is there a change in the way that this technology is being developed and deployed, or is it something that AI can help mitigate some of this, or just anyway in general how we could relate our multiple current crises to AI?
Yeah, no, fantastic question. Yes and no is the answer. So I'm seeing a lot of fantastic technology being developed and deployed actually very quickly around COVID, around better testing, tracking for new cures, and it's all accelerating. But it's not universal. So there are a lot of great companies doing really good things. There are a lot of companies not doing anything at all, or relying on very old technology, and they've got very poor results. The same is true of the Black Lives Matter movement, or rather not the movement, but the trying to tackle racism. Some companies are doing a really good job of updating their data and their algorithms to become more fair, to become more representational of society. Others aren't. So I'm seeing this absolute split, this divide between wanting to do something new, wanting to use new technology, new approaches, and then an awful lot of no change at all. It's not a priority. It's a little bit of lip service or something tokenistic, but it's not actually a change. So I'm finding you have to dig below what the PR statement is and get to something more important. You know, what's the actual change you're making? I'm not saying it's easy. It takes quite a lot of work, but either you are making a change and you do want to do something new, or you're quite happy being stuck in the past. So there is a split happening there.
I think it's interesting, and that makes me think of, we tend to think of AI or an algorithm as something that is free from bias, that is a purely technical product. We could say, well, we have an AI algorithm that sorts our resumes for us. How could there be bias in it? Like, well, we trained them on nothing but European or Caucasian names, and so every African American name it puts at the bottom of the list. So is that something that's on your mind too, is how our human biases are getting replicated in some of this?
Yes, they are. It's been on my mind for some time. I think any data scientist who has looked at this realizes it's an issue. We're also the people who are pushing this and saying this is a problem, this does need to change, and these things are broken. AI holds up a mirror to society. It shows what type of society we are. If we train it on the society of the past, this is the result we'll get. So it could be hiring, it could be loan application, it could be how you get sentenced. We have to think about the background for the data. What is the situation as to how this data was collected? If it's poorly done, if it wasn't fair, then that just gets reflected and amplified in the AI we build. So I think there's kind of two parts to this. The first is from a social point of view. We want to be fair as a society, or we should want to. The second is that if we are fair in the data we collect and the algorithms we build, the algorithms will be much, much better. So if all your drugs are tested on men who are white, university educated, and fall into a single socioeconomic category, then your drugs probably don't work very well if you're female, if you're any other background than that thing. So the results are poor. I mean, it's the same across most industries. Car safety is a good example. The majority of cars are only tested on men, and it's one size, and that's it. Volvo came up with a new set of crash test dummies, different sizes, different genders, and so on, to make the safest car possible. So I think the same can play out across all industries, and any way you use data, you say, well, how do we get much broader data so we get a better result? And it's going to help everyone, not just the white guy.
That maybe what you were talking about at the beginning too is we're going from putting people into these really big buckets to really trying to get down into the individual level, and that definitely has to take into account things like race and gender for certain. That makes a lot of sense. I want to talk about being a subject matter expert or a thought leader or any of those words that are specific people have specific objections to some of them. How did you get to be a thought leader in your industry? It's hard to talk about, but this is interesting to us as marketers who are trying to build these audiences who want to bring the people that we're marketing to something valuable, which means we want to find the people like you who are saying interesting things and spurring people to take action. So just reflecting on your secondary career here as a thought leader, how do you feel like that came to be? Was that something that you developed specifically or something that kind of arose organically?
I think it was entirely organic and accidental. I never really sort of set out to purposefully go down this route. Instead, what I do, I was curious. I wanted to know more. So I talked to a lot of people, people who had deep knowledge in one area. And I kept talking and I kept asking questions and discovering more and more and more. I think the kind of main way I've got to be where I am today is curiosity. It's being curious about the world, curious about technology, but really curious about people and how they act. For me, it's reading a lot. It's having a lot of actually private conversations with people to hear what does work, what doesn't work, and where things could head. I don't think for me, there wasn't a particular game plan. It was sort of accidental.
I think that's a good blueprint for any marketer, anybody who's seeking to build an audience. Is don't seek to build an audience, seek to get to know people and what they want and help them find it. It seems like that's where you're coming from. So if you're frequently approached, I know, by marketers who are looking for your participation in things. You've worked with us on several. And I'm wondering what makes you say yes to a project?
I've got to like what the project is about, what it's trying to do. And I've also got to believe in, say, the technology or the approach. I think without that, you're selling something. You're just selling something which you don't believe in, and that's never really going to work. I found that people want to hear a ground truth from me. They want to hear what works, what's hype, and also what doesn't work. And I think being kind of honest about, yes, this approach is good, or no, it could be changed up. I think that's part of it. So, for me, it's not by industry; it's much more by intent.
It seems like integrity is a part of that too, from what you're saying, that it has to be something that is worth lending your voice to, and not just an excuse to get your name out there. It really seems more thoughtful. Would you say that's true?
Yes, absolutely. I think it does need to be something new and interesting. And that's the sort of conversations I have. So if I'm talking about something, old or frankly not very exciting, it's not going to go anywhere. People expect to have a new conversation. So that's, I think, for me, the most important thing.
Is there anything that is a turnoff in addition to just the subject matter in the way that somebody would choose to approach you? Or is there a deal breaker that you've seen there?
Yeah, I think ethics are important. If a product or service is excluding a lot of people, and I'm not saying necessarily to have a company which say, hey, we're a racist company or sexist, but at a certain point, if something feels like a very dated approach, it's not really going to work. But then people know they need to come up with something which is smarter.
I'm glad to hear that you haven't been approached by people who say, we are a sexist and racist company, and we are hoping that you will shill our product for us.
No, but I've called out companies for being exactly that, quite loudly. But it's calling out the product or the service from a particular company, not necessarily the CEO or the team behind it, but much more saying, look, there's an issue here with this piece of technology, but trying to do it in a way that you can have a dialogue as to what change might look like. Companies on the whole don't want to be the bad guy or don't want to put out a very poor product. They want to change, but I think having the conversation is quite hard at the moment.
Do you feel the pressure at all to temper what you're saying in thinking of who you might work with in the future or who might be turned off by this or that message, or do you more focus on just being as true to yourself as you can be?
It's a really good question. I think as the stakes get higher, it's harder in a way to make that call. But I've decided I have to be true to who I am. I have to call out the things which I feel are wrong, but also the things which are right, which are companies are doing great work. If you lose that integrity, why would someone listen to you? It seems to be the question I'm always asked. Does this technology work? Is this approach good? If I can't give an honest answer to that, then really people shouldn't be listening to this. That integrity piece is everything.
Yeah, it seems like you don't get to develop an audience like you have by not courting controversy and not speaking your mind. So it seems like that's the right approach for sure. Thank you for going that deep in there. I appreciate you taking that and running with it.
I'll not now, but I'll send you a recording of something I did at Moody's at the World Trade Center.
Mm.
And if you want to see pushing the boundaries.
I absolutely do. Yeah. There is a definite glee to seeing people who are intelligent speak their mind on something. And there's a lot to be said for calling your audience, saying like, these people are with me. If you believe this thing over here, if you don't think that we should be striving for racial and societal equity, then maybe I'm not your guy. Can't be everything to everybody.
It's very hard because most companies don't want to change. Countries are even worse. So around COVID, there's been a huge amount of inaction or very poor choices because people are not comfortable with technology, especially in New York City, it has to be said.
What do B2B leaders, maybe, or just leaders in industry need to be thinking about if they're going to break free, whatever that means to you?
I think it's about asking a new question, asking a big question, which is, some of it is quite challenging. Where could your company, your industry go if you have a blank slate? We need that big question, and we need the leadership to get there. The AI, the tools, the data, that's all secondary. But what is that big question? I think that's the best thing any leader could ask.
It's absolutely perfect. And what a wonderful way to wrap things up. So there you have it. All you need to do is get down into your organization's DNA and really search for that next big question. Thank you, Oliver, for joining us today. This has been really fascinating, and I wish we had 3 more hours at least to cover it, but I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much.